It was actually quite interesting. Why I'm presenting here is because we started having discussions on our side in Deloitte around what are we seeing around open source. Because I started asking our IT audit guys some questions around what are they seeing, what are some of the issues, where's this going, and then I just happened to run into Michi from Obsidian, known each other for years, used to work for Obsidian, had a bit of chat around, he says, but they're seeing the other side of that coin. And it was funny, it was all happening at the same time. So here I am today. I want to talk to you about governance and open source, some of the good and some of the bad. I think Graham, if you're still here, Graham kind of delivered half of my presentation, and I'll just talk about the doom and gloom side. Right, we'll go through. Okay, so the governance of IT is where I start. So organizations are more and more obliged to apply thorough governance in terms of the corporate governance as well as governance of IT. And in South Africa we have King 3 Code and a number of other things. The Companies Act supplements that, and there's some other regulations for particular industries. Two key things there is proper alignment between business and IT. Okay, so Graham was talking about projects that have failed and then going for a very strong open source perspective. Never would have happened as well as it did there if business didn't buy into what they were doing. Okay, if business doesn't buy in and IT goes ahead and does that, things go wrong, IT gets blamed for everything, whether it is related to their journey, strategic journey, or their architectural journey they're taking or not. Then the other important one is, do you know what you have? So a large part of my talk today is about what is in your organization, do you know about it, and are you managing it thoroughly? Right. IT risk management. Most IT guys don't like the words IT and risk in the same sentence, because risk means governance, it means well-documented code and all of those things that just become an obstacle if you are a free thinker, you're creative, and you can come up with ideas and products quickly. But it's integral and it's necessary. Some organizations are good at organizing risk without involving the IT guys too much, but still dealing with IT risk. Often that's financial services institutions, large mining houses are getting this right, large manufacturing concerns, but the smaller businesses, the South Africa only or Africa only type businesses, because they're small, they're growing quickly, they're innovative, they're entrepreneurial, that's the last thing on the agenda. It's just get it out there, make it work, and hopefully it stays up. Okay, so the 7 key principles espoused by the King 3 Code is the board has authority. Okay, so the board should tell you yes or no. The board should give you the risk context within which you launch either a proprietary, a hybrid, or an open source specific IT strategy. Once again, Graham got business alignment. Many other organizations don't. They just don't talk with business. They don't get the functional specifications right. They don't ever talk about non-functional, except when the auditors turn up, and then IT's in trouble again. Who's responsible for what? Who can authorize what? So should IT go and try and solve a little problem quickly with a limited budget, which means we have no budget, but there's an open source solution that can solve this problem. We need an extra database, it needs to scale, install it quickly, it needs to be something we all understand, so MySQL, there we go. Stick it in, it works, becomes part of the production environment. Business never knew about this until something goes wrong. Who had authority who should have had the authority to authorize that? Not IT. That's not how you manage IT risk. You talk to business and you say, we have to do this, we'll save you money, we'll put it in, we make sure we have training. If you find it too risky, let's get enterprise level or some type of support contract to help us manage this as a risk. Or if you trust us, we'll go ahead and save money and deliver and derive all the benefits from the open source solution. Managing the investment, well, money is one of the things that comes up first when it comes to open source, because everyone says it's free. Okay, so it might cost you less than proprietary, but it's never really free, because there's always training, it's always better with support, and all of those other things still account for the burden on open source. Okay, and the other things are integrated risk management. So talk to risk management, talk to HR, talk to marketing, talk to everybody. Engage with stakeholders so they know where you're going, what you're up to, what the reason is why you're using open source in the first place. Because they often get visited by all the proprietary product providers, and they get hounded by these guys because have large budgets for marketing because they sell their product, and the message is skewed. And then you start encountering really serious obstacles around using open source in some organizations. Okay, talked about asset management and the risk and audit committee. That's the scary part when you have to come please explain. Often you can head that off, that please explain part, if you understand what your auditors are looking for and you understand how to, and I don't like using the term work around them. I spend a lot of time in the work I do at clients defending the client against their external audit or internal auditors. That's just the way we engage. I'm not an auditor myself. I love fiddling and toying with auditors and making their life difficult, while still ensuring risk is properly managed. So I'm not trying to do evil things. I just make sure the quality of the audit is better. Better quality audits make sure that IT spends less time wasting time trying to explain what's going on. They only focus on the things that are really going wrong. Okay, so there's some scenarios that you encounter in business around open source solutions. One is like the Investec example. So you missed the part where I said you did half of my presentation already, where it's a deliberate decision to use open source. And added to that could be enterprise level, so corporate IT and maybe a bit of production IT, as well as at the endpoint level. But it's a deliberate decision, it's well governed, everybody knows where we're going, they understand the pros and the cons, they may make a decision around using community versus enterprise supported, whatever. But it's all in the open. And we have that little bit in the middle where there's an approved software list. It might exclude or include desktop, but there's no really strong strategy. It's not a well-governed approach, so there's always this open source floating around that nobody knows about. It's the email server that quickly fixes a problem in development because it's too expensive to stick an Exchange server in there. We're quickly testing. The next thing you know, that same little mail server ends up in a tiny little virtual machine that consumes almost no resources, doing exactly what it was doing in development. Nobody knows about it though. The developers know, but they're on the next project, they forgot to document it and off they go. Nobody's supporting it, nobody's doing patching, no one's looking after security, no one changes the passwords, all of those things, just completely invisible. And then the one at the bottom, this is the one that I love, because I'm one of those organizations, that's where I work. There's an exception though. So open source is forbidden, but open source solutions solve certain problems that you cannot solve easily with, and easily is the important part, with proprietary technology. If you want to do proprietary, speaking about procurement, you have to explain to them why you want it, get the motivation, get the budget, go through these days high over-governed procurement processes, so there's a tender committee and a whole host of things, and 2 years later you say, we have the product. Business no longer has the reason why you wanted the product in the first place. Missed the opportunity, didn't have your business alignment. Those things float around. At a desktop level, we have Firefox, lots of portable apps. One of my favorite things, portable apps that solve many problems. All of those things still occur, right. Okay, I was speaking about endpoint. The problem with endpoint is that it's such a growing environment. Endpoint these days includes mobile devices that have open source software on them, and normal laptops and a huge multitude of things. You have kiosks and appliances and all kinds of things that use open source technologies. But those things are unmanaged if they're not known. Okay, so that becomes key. If your organization says no open source and no open source ever, the investment that needs to be made to discover where open source is being used to prevent the installation of unauthorized software is immense. It's not just investment in proprietary technologies, it's investment in the configuration, it's investment in the reporting of this, investment of the governance around these things, investment to making the decision whether you're going to use an open source approach to preventing unauthorized software installation, or if you're going to be a completely proprietary solution. Not many organizations do it because they also get pushback from business saying, but now in order for us not to install an authorized software, I can't even use my memory stick. And in some instances, my USB modem stopped working since you did this. So there are all these obstacles that need to be engaged. Once again, stakeholder engagement. Who has the authority to approve? Business. Go to business and say, this is what we want to do. Upside, downside. And in the middle is where the money talk comes in. It says, upside, you have better control, but it's going to cost you X amount of money. Business must make a decision around, is the money we spend worth the risk we retain if we don't do that? Okay. Dealt with that one. Okay, open source in the cloud. Briefly, many open source solutions. I'd like to think that if it wasn't for open source, there wouldn't be a cloud, because a lot of the projects that support cloud technologies and services started many moons ago as university open source projects, large scale grid computing, all of those things, and it just developed further from there. Some of the best cloud products or cloud infrastructure technologies are open source. Okay, many active projects. There's a cost advantage. So if you're using proprietary, Google would never have happened if it wasn't for open source underneath, because their cost would have been too prohibitive. Because open source community, like Graham was saying, a lot of it is around people who are creative, people who think they can try many things and they can build lots of blocks together, different technologies. There's no one fixed ecosystem like with a proprietary ecosystem. So many things can happen. You can be agile. Okay, that we covered. Sorry, I just want to go back. I missed that. Okay. So the advantages of open source. We have peer review, a proper peer review, and not just the peers in the community who are working on a particular product. My space, a lot of security professionals who are constantly reviewing and trying to break into these things. One is to break into them to say there's a problem, the other is it's how we learn. There's a lot of things we learn in the security community because of open source software. I wouldn't have been a security guy who's worth what I'm doing because if it wasn't for open source. I learned all about computers much faster and a lot better with open source technology as opposed to pre that. Okay, there's open standards, it's one of the key elements, and people often, like I was saying, I learned a lot, often the people who work in an open source paradigm have much more easily transferable and transportable skills. So it in effect lowers your cost. Okay, why do we look at enterprise open source? Well, for example, Red Hat has a reputation they wish to protect, so they commit proper first, second, third line support. With community solutions, you don't always have that. But you have very friendly people who are willing to help you, but they don't always help you middle of the night when you need the help. Okay, the other things that are good with enterprise solutions, and I'm just going to use Red Hat as an example, they build the entire stack for you. You can do virtualization in cloud, you can stick all kinds of middleware in there, and it's all certified, works together, it's a use case, and it's great. It costs money, but it doesn't cost as much as proprietary solutions, but there's still, it's open source and there are risks. The other advantage, and the one I have to talk about, is around patch management, security management. All of those things are done much better with open source enterprise. Not the process that makes sure those things happen, it's just those things are available. Patches are available more frequently or much sooner, the same with some of the other things. Management interfaces are better, which makes it easier to implement these types of things. And there's product and platform certification. We're starting to do a lot with process control systems or industrial control systems. A lot of that's also starting to move on to open source as a platform underneath, and being able to have credible certification, certain patch levels aligned with a particular product and it's stable. That's important with enterprise. You lose a lot of that when you go for community support. It doesn't guarantee you lose it, but you do. You may. Okay. Sorry. Okay. What's wrong with enterprise open source? Because the goal is stability and support, you don't have all the latest, greatest, bleeding edge features. But that might not be a bad thing. money, we spoke about the money. And I also spoke earlier on around getting your stakeholders to buy in and understand that the software is free. You know, you're saying earlier on, if it's free, it can't be worth having. You know, there's something wrong with it if it's free. Nobody wants to buy it, so there must be something wrong. It's because they don't understand how that community operates. Okay, spoke about bleeding edge. You don't pay for support on community open source. Well, you might. You might use a community open source product and engage a supporting organization to develop. Okay, I spoke about all of those. So with communities open source support, if you go down the route and you go free, and business says yes, and something goes wrong, business will say, whoa, you didn't tell us about these expenses. Why are you now engaging with these guys and these guys and these guys, and they're working long hours, and now there's this big fat bill, 2, 3, 4, 500,000 rand, if not more. When you told us it's free, there becomes you end up with a trust issue between business and IT, and things can go very sour from there. Okay. Open source and audit. Guess what? The same things we audit for in proprietary, we audit for in open source. It's technology specific with everything. Underneath all of these audit things we check, there's the COVID guide for IT governance. A lot of controls are specified in there, and all of those things are checked for. There are some of those things that are not checked for. So auditors will go and they say, yeah, JBoss or Apache, blah, 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 and they go, it's securely configured, or you're not using default passwords, etc., etc. But they miss the fact that maybe the risk appetite of the organization is not aligned with the way that they've acquired their open source solution. So a very risk-averse organization shouldn't be going without enterprise type open source, unless they have another plan or alternative way of working around it. Maybe open source is only used on less critical systems. Those things are never asked. I mean, that's where our discussion started coming up. We said lots of clients with hugely important critical systems. System goes down, reputational damage is massive, loss of business is massive. It shouldn't happen, yet they persist in using community open source. So we said, okay, that's fine, community open source is fine. So let's look at what's happening around all the other security things. Patch management and administration, default passwords, and because we get to audit both sides of the fence, proprietary, we say, okay, patch management issues, access management, identity management, configuration management, we don't know what we have, we file license violations, etc., etc., etc. So we said, right, so let's see if this is different, and there's absolutely no difference. If it's badly managed in the expensive side, it's managed just as badly on the supposedly less expensive side. So the risk is exactly the same, but it's worse if your open source side has a lot of unknown assets in there. So that's what we've picked up, and it was a revelation, because my open source community, the guys are actually a lot more diligent around patch management, because they know they have to defend a particular paradigm. But it's not the case anymore. As you're talking about operational people, it's money, save money. Often junior people in the organization, they don't understand the whole context. Those are just the top things we find. Excessive access across the board. We were talking about developers having access into production. Look, it's the reality of business. Whether you're running in an open source or proprietary or a hybrid paradigm, it's the same thing. You can't have massive IT teams anymore, so often the developer must be the production support guy, but it must be managed better. The defense around that with auditors, this is where it's one of the things we defend a lot, is that yes, we understand that the developer has access to production, but we have a bigger risk not granting that guy controlled access into production than we do with him just having access. Because if he can't get in, he's the only person who knows how this thing works, talking about skills. Only person who knows how it works, him or the other developer. So they're the only people who can support this product. Now you want us to say, sorry, you can't have access. The answer there is to say, look, we will put some kind of one-time password or one-time authorization or a well-controlled process in place. Or technologies like password vaults and things, to allow developer access into production. You get the support, you reduce and manage the risk. Okay. Right, so just some analyst views around where open source is going. And audit, guess what, we all get audited. There were some changes around the auditing rules, so the scope narrowed down for many organizations. It became financial systems only. A lot of organizations say, but we want better assurance around everything, so the scope is increasing again. So it's no longer just the financial systems, you look at the other critical systems. Production, looking at HR systems and all of those things. This is a bit more of a proprietary software focus, huge issue around cost containment, around license management. But the issue is people don't understand open source still comes with license conditions. And it's not fair if you don't stick to those licenses. So if you don't contribute to the community, you shouldn't be using the software. We had a big argument within Deloitte around that. And in the security space, we've actually contributed a lot into the OWASP project, which is a web security-based project. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Pain points. So we've dealt with those in the beginning. Okay, so the deficiencies, where my whole discussion came from is auditors don't understand what the risks are around open source. They don't say to the organization that maybe you should consider going for enterprise versus community, because in particular your IT organization is immature, you don't have the skills. If something goes wrong, you have a big problem. Okay, we've spoken about the licenses. Okay, we spoke about all the common things: badly managed, no patches, no security. With community open source, it becomes difficult as well, because often the administration interface is not the same as the enterprise version. Enterprise version, it's slick, it works, no mistakes. You can sometimes you can limit the administrative access a particular user has. With community, it's a bit more free for all. You have to try all of them out. You know, Samba is an example for file sharing with Microsoft products. You can do on the command line editing the files. That's my preference. Or you can use some of the web-based technologies, or you can use console-based. All of those. It's a huge multitude of decisions. They all have their limitations. Web-based, often there's a security issue. Console-based is limited functionality, etc., etc. And then you move across different distributions of the operating system of Linux, and then it also doesn't work. Okay, things that also go wrong we find in the proprietary space that happens a lot in open source. Let's quickly set up a MySQL database. The first thing we don't do is change the default password. So anybody who wants to fiddle with your MySQL database will just get access and do whatever they want. But don't worry, what they don't do with MySQL, they also don't do with the Oracle implementation or any of the other large-scale databases. Okay, so what do? Reduce our target with audit, so we do our patch management. We need to know what software we have, we need to know what our entitlements are around using it, and we need to be able to prove it's being managed and governed well. And learn to defend yourself against the auditors. Right, so, message. Go ahead and use open source. Go ahead and use it as much as you can. But use it responsibly, use it appropriately. Don't go down open source only route if the better decision is a hybrid solution. You will have some proprietary Unix, you'll have some Microsoft, and you'll have open source where speed is important, scalability is important, manageability is important, then you do enterprise, all of those things, flexibility. When you're building your own applications and things, open source is a very good paradigm for that. And then make sure you take advantage of the opportunities to engage with business, to prove that IT can be optimized. We can save a lot of money on capital expenditure, and we can save money on operational expenditure, because sometimes the support contracts are cheaper than they are with proprietary solutions. All right, thank you very much, everyone. Questions? Yes.
On the very nature, open source has many eyeballs on it.
Yeah.
It actually makes us all become more truthful, more upfront about what we do. And I think the problem is we're doing here, and I don't know how many of you agree, we seem to be taking a close proprietary model of implementation and costs. We're now trying to push it in to an open source world, and I think that in itself is
doesn't fit.
I'm not saying we mustn't disobey the rules of good governance, good management, etc. So I think it's time we're in the right space to take closed proprietary source code and change it in the open source world.
I agree with you. There's a lot, and you raise an important thing. A lot of the opponents to open source says, look at Firefox, thousands of vulnerabilities, and look at Internet Explorer, thousands of vulnerabilities. So Firefox can't be that good. Now, for a long time, Mozilla's defense was, yes, but those things become apparent a lot sooner than Internet Explorer's vulnerabilities become apparent. And there was a patchy area in the middle where there were delays and things. But you're exactly right. Better scrutiny, and it should be more secure. But it's also changing the way that you work in IT so that you get the same amount of control in your open source environment that you have in proprietary, but it will be different. You need to be a bit more free, but you need to have authority from business, not IT.